Week 5 is here, and we're ready to break down another week of college football previews and predictions. The first 4 weeks have not disappointed, and I don't think we're going to let up anytime soon. We've got some great in-state rivalries, great in-conference matchups coming your way, coming in hot. Let's not waste their time. I'm Nathan Johnston here with my co-host, Brad Hopkins, and today's special guest picker. That's right. He's back after a 2-week suspension. Rooster, good to have you back, man.
Good to be here.
Well, we're excited. Let's jump right into it, Brad. Let's not waste anyone's time. Like I mentioned, we're going to start off hot with a big game. First game of the week is going to be Oklahoma State at Kansas State, number 20 versus number 23 in their own respect. 12 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. Kansas State currently favored by 4.5 in this one in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Played in Manhattan, Kansas. Kansas State gets the home field advantage after losing a tough loss at BYU. We picked that game. We got a lot of heat in the comments for that one, but we're ready to bounce back this week. Forgot to mention real quick our records. I'm 11-13. Rooster is, I believe,
14-10.
14-10. And Brad, you are 13-11. So not a great week for us last week, but let's jump right into it and try to get back on track. Brad, I'll turn over to you. Thoughts on this top 25 Big 12 matchup and what could be the final destination for one of these teams, could make it to the Big 12 championship game?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, those records, it's almost like we don't know what we're doing or something, but it's rough. Yeah, Nate, you mentioned Kansas State coming off a loss, and I stayed up to watch that one. It was late, but man, I won't say that, obviously BYU outplayed Kansas State, but Kansas State just made so many mistakes, just shot themselves in the foot so many times. You look at the statistics, the box score, and you would think that Kansas State would have won that game and won it handily, but the turnovers played the story. And then, of course, for Oklahoma State coming off a very, very tough 3-point defeat last week against Utah. This one is, to me, somewhat of an elimination game as far as the Big 12 race. Both of these teams are looking for a bounce back. Real quick on Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman feels like he's been playing college football since, the early 2010s. He's been around forever. But Ollie Gordon, guys, 258 rushing yards so far. And this was the guy that many people thought he was the best running back in the country, not taken away from his talent, but he hasn't lived up to expectation. I think to an extent, I think that's why you saw Oklahoma State struggle last week against Utah. Utah, we know, is big and physical up front and on defense, and they really made it a priority to shut down Ollie Gordon. And then, jumping over to Kansas State, it was a struggle game for Avery Johnson in Provo last week. DJ Giddens struggled to get it going, and just Kansas State, just one mistake just snowballed and led to others. So my prediction for this one, I'm taking Kansas State. I think they bounce back. And once again, for Oklahoma State, I just think that they struggle to deal with the physicality of Kansas State. Chris Kleiman does a really good job, and to me is a little bit of a throwback coach. So I'm going to take the Kansas State Wildcats in this one. I'm going to take the over on this one. I think they win by single digits, but I think it's by more than 4.5. So give me the Wildcats.
Yeah, Brad, it almost seems like this is going to be a run-heavy game, which we're not used to in the Big 12. We're used to seeing the air raid. We're used to seeing high-flying offenses, and maybe we'll see a speck of that from Kansas State. But when you look at Oklahoma State, and I won't get into it because I want to get over to Rooster, it almost seems like the ground game is their most reliable resource when it comes to every angle of the game. Rooster, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this game and who comes out on top in the Big 12?
Well, like Brad mentioned in the BYU game last week, the Kansas State hand rack just gifted BYU 24 points just off of a scoop and score, a punt return, an interception at the end of the red zone, and many other missed opportunities. So looking at this game, I'm really focusing on the run game in the trenches. And when you look at it, Kansas State has really, in their last 2 games, only given up 3.4 yards a carry and 2.9 yards a carry in their last 2 games, respectively. And Ollie Gordon, much like Brad mentioned, Ollie Gordon has yet to have 50 yards in a game since week 1 against a cupcake. So, I mean, Ollie Gordon has yet to put it all together yet. So, with that being said, I mean, Kansas State, they've got DJ Giddens, they've got the transfer, they got Edwards, then you've got a dual threat quarterback. And at the end of the day, I think Kansas State's defensive line is going to be able to continue to halt Ollie Gordon. And I'm just going to be honest, I do not trust Bowman out there just to sling that thing around, because experience can only get you so far. So I'm going to take Kansas State in this one. I think they're going to get the job done.
Yeah, y'all both bring up some great points. Look, I came into this game with some bulletin board material. Brad, I talked to you about it last time I saw you. Oklahoma State football, Twitter, or X blocked me. They blocked Break the Huddle. Okay? They're the only team that I picked to win, and yet they blocked us. Why? Maybe it was some summer intern that just didn't know any better. I don't know. But I came into this game heated. And then I look on the Twitter page today, and they've unblocked me. I don't know if they knew that we were calling the game today or not, because, look, they've had me blocked for 2 months now. And I say me, I mean our account with Break the Huddle. But nonetheless, I still don't like them. Okay, you mentioned the run game with Giddens and Edwards. Look, it's a 1-2 punch. I think they're ranked top 10 in the country and rushing dynamic duo. You probably have a couple more outside of that, but they're one of the best in the country, okay? Then you look at Avery Johnson, quarterback for Kansas State. Had some mistakes against BYU last week. It was on the road in Provo in a tough environment. They get to come back home and Manhattan. And I want to say this about Oklahoma State. Y'all talk about Ollie Gordon being under 50 yards in each game, and that is true. But here's the problem with Oklahoma State. They're a one-trick pony. All they have is their run game. They can't trust Bowman to get back there and throw it and be consistent and trust him to throw it down the field without being picked off. So I think that's what you're seeing. I don't think the level of play has gone down necessarily from Olive. I was about to say Olive Garden. Ollie Gordon. Although Olive Garden's got some great deals. We're not sponsored. But I think Ollie Gordon still is a dynamic player. I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. But with Oklahoma State, there's nothing else that they can do. They rely on him too much. You saw him get a DUI in the offseason, and yet the coach comes out and says that, oh, we're going to punish him by giving him the ball. Why? Because if they suspend him, his butt is gone. His coaching job, he's out. And I know Mike Gundy's been there for a while, but look, let's call a spade. Without Ollie Gordon, that Oklahoma State offense is nothing. And that's nothing to take away from some of the other players that work their tails off week in and week out. But look, we're here to win football games. And when you can't throw the ball and you're one-dimensional, it's gonna cause some issues, and it's gonna expose you real quickly. That's my rant for today. Give me the Kansas State Wildcats in a big one. I have them winning by 15 to 20 points. So give me Kansas State at home to bounce back and get back on the winning track in hopes of going to the Big 12 championship game. Be sure to subscribe down below and let us know in the comments who you think will come out on top in this Big 12 matchup. Our next game takes us down to the ATL, the city of Atlanta, in Atlanta, Georgia, where the Georgia Southern Eagles go on the road to take on the Georgia State Panthers. 3:30 kickoff on ESPNU, and Georgia State currently favored in this one by 3.5, played at Center Park Stadium, the old home of the Atlanta Braves, formerly known as Turner Field. This is also known as the Georgia Grown Bowl. I believe this might be the inaugural season of the Georgia Grown Bowl. Now, these two teams have played each other each year, but I think this is the first year they're calling it the Georgia Grown Bowl. And boy, what a great name that is. Two very underrated programs in their own respect. And here we sit talking about these two teams. Unlike most sports networks out there, Break the Huddle brings it to you live, boots on the ground in Atlanta. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Pretty interesting game for us on the slate. Who do you have winning the Georgia Grown Bowl?
Absolutely. I'm excited about this one, and I want to give a shout-out to head coach Dell McGee here in his first year at Georgia State, taking you back real quick to winter and then spring football. Of course, Coach McGee got the Georgia State job very, very late. I mean, I want to say it was mid-February. I mean, I believe Georgia State had started spring practice, and their former head coach had decided to go back to South Carolina, and Georgia State hires Coach McGee from Georgia, where he was the running back coach under Kirby's whole tenure. And I think this was, guys, just to me, just a home run hire. He knows the state. He's got connections. And look, I'm really, really impressed with what they've done. You know, he's got some old Georgia, coaches to be coordinators and on his staff. But I think just his familiarity, with the state, and just his ability to go into these schools and recruit, as well as, hit the portal when it comes up. And he's doing a fantastic job. They were competitive for a while with Georgia Tech in the opener. They beat UT Chattanooga. And then, of course, 2 weeks ago, they upset Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt, I take it for what you will. They're 2-2 right now. But I still think, guys, when a Sun Belt team beats an SEC team, that's still, I think that's something to say. Jumping over to Georgia Southern, Clay Helton, I'm really impressed with. And this is a guy, of course, he was the head coach at USC, one of the biggest programs in the country, and now he comes down to South Georgia Statesboro, and he's not talked about a whole lot these days, but he's doing a really, really good job there. They're 2-2, but they had a very, very competitive game against Boise State week 1. I know they got blown out against Ole Miss, but guys, and we all know this, sometimes you learn more about your team in a loss. And I think the exposure against an SEC team playing against those lines of scrimmage, it's going to be beneficial for Georgia Southern. I'm excited. And guys, this one simply comes down for me of can Georgia State slow down Georgia Southern? Georgia Southern has got an electric passing attack, led by quarterback J.C. French. He's a sophomore, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick on the year. I'm gonna go with an upset. I'm going with the Georgia Southern Eagles in this one. I just think that air raid offense is going to be too much. Georgia State does not quite have the offense yet to slow it down, and I think Georgia Southern returns to Statesboro with a win under its belt.
Wow. And we talk about the in-state rivalry, state or Southern, right? That's what they say. Or they probably say state not Southern or Southern not state. I think that's how it goes. But nonetheless, these two programs hate each other. They really do. And they want this win. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Rooster. Who do you have winning this Georgia-grown matchup we got?
Well, when we go and look at the schedules from this past week, Georgia Southern just got absolutely torched by Ole Miss. They're going to have some injuries. That SEC, the big bodies, the ground and pound, just wear and tear on their bodies. And then you got Georgia State, who had a bye week. They've been able to take a look at some film. They've been able to readjust, hydrate, get ready for the game. And then you go and look at the offense and defense. And this game, in my opinion, is going to come down to the trenches. Del McGee, he is a run game coach, the Georgia running backs coach previously last year, and he comes into Georgia State. He's going to institute a ground and pound run game in this game because he's going to have to keep Georgia Southern off the field in order to win this game. Because if Georgia Southern has the ball, they're just going to be flying up and down the field with that air raid offense. And with that being said, I think Georgia State, they're just going to have to implement a strong run game because, if they don't, then it's going to be game over. But I have faith in the ex-Georgia Arby's coach. I think he's going to be able to get the job done. I'm taking Georgia State to cover this one in a very, very close game.
Yeah, you guys bring up a lot of great points. One goes with Georgia Southern, one goes with Georgia State, making it really hard on me because of my record thus far. But nonetheless, one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that Georgia State's offense has had 141 yards of penalties on 15 infractions. That's really undisciplined. And coming from a guy like Del McGee, you have to think that's a culture problem that he's in the middle of, that he's currently churning week after week, trying to weed out the weakness and the laziness and the excuses, because that's really what it boils down to. Can Georgia State limit their mistakes? That's 141 yards. That's a football and a half of penalties on offense. That's unacceptable. You cannot do that. And when you do that, you're going to lose games. Now, granted, they have the home field advantage. So they're going to have the home crowd on their side. Hopefully that helps a little bit with those penalties. But when you look at their offense as well, it's also averaging 392 yards per game. That's pretty impressive. So you look at Georgia Southern. Yes, they barely lost a close one to Boise State, who's got a phenomenal running back we're going to get to in a minute. But on the other side, Georgia State, I have to think with the home field advantage that they get this done in Atlanta, and I think they send Georgia Southern packing with another loss. It's going to be a close game, but give me the Georgia State Panthers to cover the spread and win it by 5. Let us know down in the comments who you believe will win this Georgia Grown Bowl, and be sure to subscribe down below. Our next game of the week takes us out to the beautiful city of Las Vegas, Nevada, in Allegiant Stadium, where the Fresno State Bulldogs go on the road to take on the UNLV Rebels. This is a 3:30 kickoff on Fox Sports 1. And I guess the producer in the back decided to keep Tennessee by 7 up there. So that is not the right spread on this game. But nonetheless, I'm sure Brad will mention it in his pick. And I'll let you speak about the spread. But this is a big matchup for these two. I mean, these are two programs on the outside looking in when it comes to playoff contentions heading into the 2024 season. And now they've got a shot. This is their chance to shine underneath the bright lights of Las Vegas. And you have to think whoever comes out on top in this one, like I mentioned, has a really good chance up there with Boise State to have a shot, like I said, to get into the playoffs. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this Mountain West matchup, and with conference realignment coming up, these two teams might not be playing each other much longer.
Yeah, that's absolutely a really good point. So UNLV is favored at home by 4 in this one. Two really two good programs right now in the Mountain West. You mentioned these two teams are probably right up there with Boise State as kind of the favorites. For Fresno State, they're just a program that's just a model of consistency. Of course, they lost to Michigan week 1, but were competitive for really 3 quarters with them, and they've taken care of business in their other 3. They're led by quarterback Mikey Keene. He transferred from UCF, and he's just kind of doing his thing. Guys, one interesting note, though, for me is 6 touchdowns but 4 picks. I think he's been a little bit more careless with the football this year, and that's something that he's definitely going to have to watch out to. And they've got a really dynamic 1-2 punch at receiver. Mac Delina and Jalen Moss are a really good 1-2 punch. Those two have combined for over 600 yards, 33 catches. I mean, just a really nice 1-2 punch there for Mikey Keene. I want to focus, though, on UNLV, and I'll go ahead. UNLV is my pick for this one. I think they beat the spread, but I'm really impressed with the job that Barry Odom has done there in Las Vegas. He's just got this team running. We've talked about this guy. Matthew Sluka is just one of the most fun players in the country. This guy can get it done with his arm. He can get it done with his legs. Guys, this is interesting to me. 4 players already for UNLV with at least 100 yards rushing. So you can't key on one guy. This is a very unique offense. And my last takeaway before I turn over to you guys, if your team is looking for an up-and-coming offensive coordinator, I encourage you to watch this game because UNLV has got a young offensive coordinator in Brennan Marion, who I don't think he's going to be in Vegas after this year. He's going to get a big-time coaching job. He has been in a lot of different programs. He's run a lot of different systems. They're running this really fun, almost like a triple option offense from the shotgun. It's just really fun. He's so dynamic. So if you know that your team is going to be searching for an offensive coordinator, hey, he may even get some head coaching opportunities, but taking the Rebels in this one, I think their running game is just too much, and I think they beat the spread in this one.
Yeah, Brad, you bring up a lot of great points, and one thing you mentioned about the offensive coordinator, I think it's very possible that he does stay in Vegas because I think Barry Odom could be on his way out to getting a bigger job, and maybe that opens the door for a guy like Marion to stay in Vegas and become UNLV's new head coach. So we don't know what's going to happen, but that's always a possibility as well. Rooster, I'll turn over to you. Who wins this Mountain West matchup?
Well, we know the UNLV has already won a couple of close games this season against some I would say some superior competition, beating Kansas on the road.
Sure.
And they're coming off of a bye week. They've had time to rest up. Their running game is just absolutely phenomenal. But I want to touch on one thing I may be overlooking in this game, the 3:30 kickoff.
Uh-oh.
UNLV has already been able to play a couple road games against Kansas and other teams closer to the East Coast. They're more used to the earlier time games.
Sure.
However, Fresno State is used to these 7:30, 10:30 Eastern kickoffs. So UNLV is already going to be up. They're already going to have their filet mignon, their potatoes. They're already going to be fed. These Fresno State guys may be getting out of the bed having to grab a Lucky Charms cereal bar on the way to the door because they just slept through their alarm.
Sure.
So I think the Fresno State, they also have not had a very impressive schedule this season at all. They gave up 30 to Sacramento State. That's yikes. So I'm going to take UNLV coming off the bye in this one. I think they're going to get it done pretty handily.
Yeah, y'all mentioned a lot of great points. One thing that I noticed when I was doing my research was, to your point, Brad, Sluka is one of those guys where he uses his feet a lot. And Fresno State's going to have to stop that. I don't know if they have the defensive capability to do that. When you look at a team like UNLV, they can beat you in multiple ways. They can shut you down with their defense, or they can sling it around and run it with their offense. And that's hard to stop. When you win 2 of the 3 phases in a football game, I've said this time and time again, said it to you, said it to Rooster, you're going to win ball games. That's how BYU won last week against Kansas State. Everyone wants to talk about how poorly Kansas State played, and that's great. But at the end of the day, BYU didn't beat themselves. So is Fresno State going to beat themselves, or is UNLV going to beat themselves? I want to mention real quick, because y'all both talked about the run game, but I think a lot of people forget about this guy for UNLV. Wide receiver Ricky White, the third, coming over a transfer, I believe, from Michigan, if I have that correct, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a very, very dynamic guy, spread out, and he's the number one target for Sluka at quarterback. He's caught 10 catches for 125 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's pretty dang good. 3 touchdowns on 10 catches. You got to be happy with that. And I think that's going to play a role in this game too. Look for Ricky White, the third, to get out in space. They got home field advantage. They're going to be able to communicate. They got the home crowd on their side. They're playing in Vegas. All their chips are on the table, so to speak. But credit to Fresno State. They've been a great program year in and year out, but this year they've just kind of been under the radar. You mentioned Mikey Keene. We really liked him when he was coming from UCF, Brad, a year ago, and we really thought highly of him. We thought he was going to do a better job, but he just hasn't panned out. So as much as we like Fresno State, give me the UNLV Rebels in a close one. I think they win it 33-28. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think UNLV pushes out at the end in the fourth quarter. Let us know in the comments who you think is going to win this Mountain West matchup, and be sure to subscribe down below. We're going to stay out in the Midwest and head out to the dry land of Lubbock, Texas, West Texas, where the Cincinnati Bearcats hit the road to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I believe this is the first time we've talked about these two programs in the 2024 season, Brad. We're excited for this matchup. 8 o'clock kickoff on ESPN2, and Texas Tech currently favored with the home field advantage at Jones AT&T Stadium. Wow, Jerry Jones owns about everything in this country. Texas Tech favored by 3 in this one, and both of these programs have had their ups and downs over the last few years. Cincinnati obviously making it to the playoff. Texas Tech, with McGuire at head coach, has done a phenomenal job with what he's had to work with. He's really helped that program stay afloat. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this Big 12 matchup, which is weird to think about with Cincinnati, but nonetheless, who comes out on top in Lubbock?
Yeah, absolutely. Very weird to think about this matchup being a Big 12 game. We're still taking a lot to get used to. Starting off with Cincinnati, really impressed with the jump that Cincinnati has made here year 2 under Scott Satterfield. They have been, they've made improvements. I mean, 3-1 come to this game and reasonably should be 4-0. They lost that one to Pitt by 1 point. I'm impressed with their quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and no picks, guys. He's taking care of the football. Their running back, Corey Kenner, over 400 yards. He's looked good. Scott Satterfield, everywhere he's been, he's a program builder, and he just does a good job. They're disciplined. They're going to play, smart football. They're going to be explosive on offense, and that fits Cincinnati this year. And then jumping over to Texas Tech, Nate, you mentioned a guy that I know we're both really high on, Joey McGuire. I really, really like this guy. And I was, reading so many of the preseason magazines and articles. Texas Tech, man, right there on the verge of busting through in this new look Big 12. And I think that's fair. They are considered, that Texas Tech staff is the best recruiting staff. They had last year the best, the highest ranked recruiting class in the Big 12, and they just need some time to develop. That coaching staff seems good, but also to stay healthy. The last couple of years, they've lost their starting quarterback at some point in the season, and Baron Morton is healthy this year, 12 touchdowns to 2 picks. He has been fantastic, and guys, you guys know I'm big on talking about up-and-coming coordinators, and Texas Tech has got an up-and-coming offensive coordinator in Zach Kitty. He came from Western Kentucky, but he runs this air raid offense, and I think he's going to get some – I honestly think he could get some head coaching offers at the end of this year, or even, maybe a bigger, job as offensive coordinator. But the thing that separates – to me, this Texas Tech offense, and really what makes them go is, you think about this air raid offense where they're going to put, 4 wide receivers, 5 wide receivers on the field at times. They have got such a physical running back in Taj Brooks. This guy was unbelievable last year, and he's been really good this year. The thing that stands out is these 230 pounds. You don't think about an air raid offense having this power running game, and he brings that. For Texas Tech this year, guys, they've been somewhat suspect on defense. They gave up 51 in the opener to Abilene Christian. They were able to win that one. They really, really didn't look good against Washington State, but they've bounced back very, very nicely. And I thought it was a really, really big one, them beating Arizona State last week and really playing good defense. So that being said, I'm taking the Red Raiders in this one. I'm just a huge fan of Joey McGuire, the culture that he's building. I think they win this one by 14 points. I think this is an up-and-coming team. I don't think they compete for the Big 12 this year, but I think next year they're going to be in consideration. And I think the Red Raiders are going to win this one and improve to 4-1.
Wow. Red Raiders coming out hot, according to Brad. Cincinnati fans might think otherwise, but Rooster, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this Big 12 matchup, and like I asked Brad, who comes out in Lubbock?
Well, as Brad mentioned, both quarterbacks this season have been playing excellent football. So we know both teams are going to be able to throw the ball. So at the end of the day, I hate to keep repeating myself in these picks, but it's going to come down to the run game. And I would take Taj Brooks over Kiner every day of the week. Taj Brooks is just an absolute monster. And, something we may be forgetting, Cincinnati may be getting a little PTSD pulling up to AT&T Stadium, throwing back to the Cotton Bowl from Alabama. We may just see a little flashback when Taj Brooks, just like Najee Harris, just jumps straight over all the Cincinnati defense, just walks his way right to the end zone, because Texas Tech is going to take the dub in this game.
Well, Ross, this is a different AT&T Stadium. I hope you realize that. But nonetheless, it is probably owned by the Jones family. But y'all bring up a lot of great points. Both quarterbacks playing well. Both coaches in their own regard have turned these programs around. When Luke Fickell left Cincinnati, we thought they were done for. Then Satterfield comes in, like you mentioned, Brad, and keeps it afloat. And same thing with Joey McGuire. Mike Leach put Texas Tech on the map. He really put his spin, RIP to Mike Leach. He really put his spin on what this Texas Tech program was about. They were just different. And as a former, Texas fan growing up, it was hard seeing that. But looking back, it was very special. So you want to see and root for programs like Texas Tech and like Cincinnati, the Blue Bloods, the Pitts, the West Virginias, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get into an Oprah episode, but nonetheless, let's keep it to football. These two programs are coming in fighting for a Big 12 spot. Both teams off to a hot start. It really just comes down to who wins the line of scrimmage. And to me, that's Texas Tech. I just think that they're just slightly better up front. I think Joey McGuire is going to have his team ready to play on Saturday in Lubbock, a night game. So it's really, really going to be rocking in Jones AT&T Stadium. Such an electric atmosphere. If you get a chance to watch this game, please, please do. I know a lot of eyes will be on the big game in Tuscaloosa, but if you get a chance to flip it over to this game, you're going to want to see it. It's a really cool atmosphere. The black horse with the red raider riding out of the entrance. It's a really cool tradition in college football. So I hope you'll check it out. But give me the Texas Tech Red Raiders, guns up. Be sure to subscribe down below and let us know who you think will come out in this Big 12 matchup in Lubbock, Texas. Our next game takes us out to the Northwest, where the Washington State Cougars hit the road to take on the number 25 Boise State Broncos. This is a Saturday night kickoff, 10 p.m. late kickoff Eastern time on Fox Sports 1. Boise State currently favored in this one by 7.5 points, playing in Albertsons Stadium in Boise, Idaho, one of the coolest stadiums in all of college football. Last week we talked about BYU Stadium in Provo, Utah, and the beautiful mountain scenery. And this one, your eyes will be directly glued to the blue field in Boise. Such a spectacular view for a college football fan. And I actually haven't played at Boise's field in the new college football game yet, so I need to check that out. But nonetheless, let's keep it to the game. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. These are two very interesting programs heading into the 2024 season. We know the history of Boise State in years' time, winning against Oklahoma in a close one back in the day in the Fiesta Bowl, and then Washington State getting left out, staying in the Pac-2, and hoping to add a few teams in a couple of years to bounce back. They got a key win last week. And, Brad, who do you have coming out on top in this one?
This is going to be a fun one. I'm really excited about this one. Boise State's, coming in at 25, and we haven't heard a ton about them. I feel like, of course, beat Georgia Southern, lost a very close one to Oregon, then took care of business against Portland State. And you guys know they feature one of the best playmakers, one of the best running backs in the country, in Ashton Genty, 586 yards. 9 touchdowns already. I mean, that is just absolutely unheard of. He's got a long of 77, 10.5 yards per carry. This guy's just unbelievable. And that offense, it runs. I mean, it truly, truly runs through him. Guys, this is another big stat that jumped out to me. Boise State, as a team on defense, already 12 sacks, so they know how to get after the quarterback and put pressure and just try to make teams one-dimensional. I got to talk about Washington State though, because to me, just I hate it for them that they're that they're in this Pac-2 now, because guys, I'm looking at the schedule. If I think there's a legit chance that this team could have one loss or maybe undefeated. I mean, really dominated Texas Tech, and then a couple weeks ago in the Apple Cup beat I think a really good Washington team. So hats off to the Washington State Cougars. And once again, talking about a really fun playmaker, quarterback John Mateer. This guy just is. I mean, when you say dual threat, you put this guy's picture up next to it. Has thrown for 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, and has rushed guys for 425 yards. He's got a long of 68 yards and 5 touchdowns. So we're talking about, I mean, 2 running backs, and one of them is playing quarterback too. So this is going to be a really, really fun game. Nate Rooster, I got to tell you, Albertson Stadium, it's one of my destination places. I really, really want to go here. So if any Boise State fans in the comments wants to hook us up with a game in the future, I know we would absolutely love it. But this, in all seriousness, this is that's beautiful country out there, and to get to see a game on the blue turf, I hope to get out there one day. But Boise State fans probably going to make you mad. I'm taking the Washington State Cougars in the upset here. I just think that Boise State struggles to slow down John Mateer. I think he's just too much, and his ability to run is going to keep that Boise State defense from being, attacking. If they do attack and they get out of their lanes, he's going to kill them on the ground, and I think that's the difference in this one. Give me the Cougars.
Wow, Brad, trying to catch all the strays in the comments this week. One thing that's interesting to me that sticks out is the Cougars are 3-1 against the spread this year. Boise State 1-2 against the spread this year. To your point, Brad, about picking Washington State. But Rooster, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this game and who comes out in the Pac-2 versus Mountain West matchup?
Well, as Brad said, Ashton Denty is just a force to be reckoned with. And Washington State, they've had a couple of tough wins. They've been playing in some close games. They've been able to get the job done. But one thing I want to point out is, what has Boise State done so far to deserve a top 25 ranking?
Sure.
Because Oregon has shown that they are not what they were last year. They don't have Bo Nix. They don't have Tez Johnson. They don't have Bucky Irving. They don't have half of the returning offense. So, and their ranking was just from what was done last year. And then they go in there and they played a 3-point game. I mean, they made it a close game, but at the end of the day, you still lose the game. And Oregon has not looked impressive whatsoever this season. And then beating Portland State and whoever else. I mean, it's just not a good schedule so far. They haven't done anything, in my opinion, to prove. Georgia Southern actually did turn it all over Georgia Southern, but I mean, Georgia Southern has no defense whatsoever. And then you have Portland State. That is nothing to brag about. But Washington State, on the other hand, has been able to put up strong performances week in and week out. They've been able to run the ball effectively. They've been able to throw it when they need to. And with all that being said, as much as a home field advantage Boise State's going to have in this game, I'm going to take the team that has a full offense compared to a team that's going to be relying on one man to save the team. So I think if Washington State can just get about 3 or 4 stops throughout the course of the game, just get a stop a quarter, they should be able to come out of this game pretty handily, I would say. And I think that 7.5-point spread, that's a little rough for it to be an undefeated team, because Washington State, I think this game has playoff implications for both teams.
Sure.
Washington State, if they win this game, they have a very solid chance of going undefeated and running the table, which would leave them as an undefeated at-large team, which I think would be very tough to leave out. And then if Boise State wins this game, I mean, they'll shoot up the rankings in terms of the Group of 5 competition. And at the end of the day, I think the winner of this game has a very good chance of making it the college football playoff. But I think I'm going to take Washington State in this one because Boise State just hasn't proved much, in my opinion.
Yeah, y'all make a lot of great, solid points choosing this game. Both of y'all picking Washington State. It makes me want to go Boise State to get back in the hunt. But I got my eyes on one guy in this game, and that's the quarterback for the Washington State Cougars, John Mateer. Such a beautiful head of lettuce. I mean, just an absolute force of main. We talked about this guy before, and I got to talk about him again. Look, there's one thing about Washington State, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 guys at quarterback. They all have great hair. And when I think of Washington State, I think of Mike Leach again. We talked about Texas Tech, and we talked about what Mike Leach did for the Washington State program as well. He just made it fun. He made it exciting, and he put them on the map in a way that we never thought was possible for a team up in the Northwest. And then you look at a quarterback like Gardner Minshew, who played under Mike Leach at Washington State. Then steps in John Mateer to take the reins. I know it's several years later, but, man, he keeps it going with the great hair. Think he could potentially get a great stash going like the Minshew mustache, but maybe that's trademarked already up there at Washington State. But nonetheless, y'all make a lot of great points. I also want to add that Washington State has 5 interceptions thus far on their defense, and that's pretty impressive through 4 weeks. That's about 1 per game. I know that's kindergarten math, and I'll probably get heat for that in the comments, but hey, that's really good. Not many teams can say that right now, even some of the top dogs. So it's going to be a battle test for sure for both teams. I think Boise State's going to play Washington State very closely. I think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, but in the end, y'all mentioned John Mateer's running game. Y'all also mentioned the running back for Boise State and Ashton Genty. I just think in the end, Washington State just has a little bit more explosiveness on offense and on defense. Give me the Washington State Cougars in a close one in Boise, Idaho come Saturday night. Let us know down in the comments who you think comes out on top in Boise, Idaho, and subscribe down below. And that takes us to our final game of the Week 5 previews and predictions out to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and what could be the key matchup of the century. The number 2 Georgia Bulldogs hit the road to take on the number 4 Alabama Crimson Tide. Both teams riding high, hoping to come out with a huge win to gain some momentum heading forward into the season. 7:30 kickoff on ABC/ESPN Plus. Georgia favored on the road by 2 in this one in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Brad, look, we have our own personal opinions on this game. Hopefully we can leave it out for these picks, but who do you have coming out on top and what could be one of the most anticipated matchups of this year?
Man, this is so fun. And to the SEC schedule makers, man, to put this one and to put it so early in the season, I mean, it's a treat for us as fans. So many storylines in this one. Obviously, you know, Kirby's not facing his protege and Nick Saban anymore. We got Kalen DeBoer on the sidelines. And guys, I will say really the first time that we get to see what a Kalen DeBoer team is. And I say that, and that's no disrespect to the teams Alabama has played so far, but this is the first test. And, you know, keep that in mind too. USF did keep it very, very close with Alabama a few weeks ago. But we're going to find a lot about Kalen DeBoer and how he does in big-time SEC games. Mentioned just so many storylines, starting with Alabama, of course, Jalen Milroe, one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country. Truly, once again, we talk about dual threats, and he fits that. Jan Miller, Justice Haynes, there at running back there, formed a 1-2 punch. And then the 17-year-old phenom at wide receiver, Ryan Williams. This guy is so explosive. He looks like the next great Alabama receiver. Guys, a big question mark, though, is we know Alabama lost a lot off that defense, just whether it was transfer portal or guys leaving. And don't get me wrong, they bring back some very, very talented guys. Malachi Moore, Lawson, Jahad Campbell. Of course, they bring in Michigan transfer Keon Sabb. They brought in LT Overton. Just a lot of guys, but Alabama did lose a lot. So I think that's one storyline. Guys, and I will say, you know, you look at who these two teams have played so far. This is by far the Georgia. This is the best team that Alabama's faced. This is the best team that Georgia's faced. But, you know, breaking this down more, for Georgia, this is the best offense they face. For Alabama, this is the best defense they face. So that is just really interesting to me. I think, you know, jumping over to Georgia, you know, they're finally getting healthy up front, and I think that's a big point, because we saw Kentucky gash them a little bit. We saw a lot of missed tackles. You know, and I think Carson Beck is, you know, he's looked at that Kentucky game where he was not anywhere close to his best, and Georgia needs him to be on his A++ game. This is a chance for Trevor Etienne to really step up and make some plays, and that Georgia receiving core, you know, they need to step up and make some plays. Guys, to me, this comes down to can Georgia's defense slow down Jalen Milroe and force him to beat them in the pocket? And to me, it's going to come down to two guys. It comes down to Jalen Walker, who is kind of a jackknife. He does a little bit of everything for Georgia, and Raylan Wilson, you know, one of those linebackers that he's got legitimate 4.4 speed, that I think these two guys are going to be tasked with spying Jalen Milroe. For that reason, very, very, very close game. I think it comes down to a late score in the fourth quarter. I'm going with Georgia. Obviously, I think Alabama has got a legit chance to win this one. And if Georgia turns the ball over, and the fact that this one's in Tuscaloosa, Alabama wins this one. But I think Georgia just makes a couple more plays on defense, a couple more tackles for loss to put Alabama behind the chains. And I think Jalen Milroe comes up short, and I'm taking Georgia in a very, very close one.
Wow, Brad, great pick. Rooster, I'll turn it over to you. Who wins this SEC primetime matchup?
Well, we know that this is easily the biggest game of the year to this point. This has a lot of future implications down the line in the SEC championship game and so on.
Sure.
But I think the big factor in this game is going to be explosive plays. And outside of maybe a couple of plays here and there, I mean, Georgia really has not had many explosive plays this season. And Alabama has had, I don't know if you've heard, he's only 17. If you've only heard that, I've only heard that about 8,000 times. It's only 17.
Yep.
And he seems to score a touchdown every time the ball touches his hand. Ryan Williams for Alabama.
Sure.
But Georgia's defense is absolutely loaded. They've got first-round picks everywhere. This may not be a defensive line. This may not be a defensive line of the past where we've had Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Trayvon Walker. But this secondary is one of the best we've seen in a long time. You've got a first-round draft pick back there. We've also got a plethora of linebackers. So I think Georgia is really going to do I think their defense will be able to put on a strong performance this weekend. And Alabama, as long as Georgia can take away the deep shots, I think that they're able to come away with the game because, I mean, Milroe, he seems to perfect the long ball, but anything in between, he really struggles with that. And I do think that Georgia, they're very strong. They've got Carson Beck on the offense, ETN. But I think something we're overlooking is Ratledge being done for at least about 2 months until the Georgia-Florida game. And that's going to be a big blow to the offensive line. But at the end of the day, I've got to hedge my bets. I think I'm going to take Alabama Tide. I'm taking the Crimson Tide to win the game. It may be an overreaction, but I just don't have much confidence in the Dogs right now. But I got to hedge my bets. You know, we can't show bias towards the audience.
Well, look, there's no bias from any of us, but coming from a current UGA student, that's got to be heartbreaking for the Dogs fans to hear. Coming from such a loyal,
confidence is low right now, Nate.
Loyal, loving fan that bleeds black and red for the Dogs, but nonetheless, y'all bring up so many great points. But I think y'all missed one. Or maybe not missed it, but didn't hit on it. We look at big games like this. These games come down to who wins in the trenches. And that's what this game's going to come down to. Brad, you mentioned it. You mentioned the D-line for Georgia. They have not been the same, and you mentioned it too. They have not been the same since the last few years ago when they had the best defense to ever come through. And granted, look, you're not going to get that year after year. That's impossible to replicate what they had back in, I believe, 2021, 2022. But they've got some some playmakers playing on defense nonetheless. You talk about the weakness of the offensive line. You talk about Ratledge being out the rest of the year. That's a big blow, not just size-wise and experience, but leadership. When you got a guy out there playing week after week, day after day in practice, it builds confidence. And some of those younger offensive linemen look to those guys for leadership and for direction. So it's really disappointing to lose a guy like that. Nonetheless, it's really going to come down to, like Brad said, it's going to come down to Jalen Walker, and I want to mention another guy, Tyron Ingram Dawkins. I think he's another guy to look out for to plug the holes up front and to keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket. If they cannot contain him in the pocket with a 4-man rush or a 3-man rush, they're going to have to pull a linebacker or a nickel to spy on Jalen Milroe, and that's going to open up the secondary. That's not good for Georgia. I know they got some absolute dogs in the secondary, but it's going to be tough when you got to pull another guy from that area to keep an eye on the quarterback. On the offensive side for Georgia, they've had a lot of trouble running the ball this year. We were at the Clemson game, and even against it. And granted, Clemson has a good defensive line, but they were not getting anything up front. And so you have to wonder, are they going to have to do the play action? Will the play action work? Are they going to have to set up some screen plays? That's going to be the biggest question mark. It's really hard for me to pick in this game for both reasons, but I'm going to take the Dogs on a close one. I think Carson Beck and his poise, this is a big test for him. We've seen Carson Beck play in big games, but this would be the biggest one he's played in thus far, besides last year against Bama. Does he want a revenge game? Does he want to come out and prove himself? If he comes out and proves himself in this game, he's going to jump up in the Heisman contender race, no doubt about it. Give me the Dogs in a very, very close one. I think not only does it come down to the trenches, it comes down to the kicking game. I think Georgia's got the better kicker in this one. We talk about this too all the time, is kickers have one job. They get a couple of chances in the game. If not, you're going to see a lot of Cobras in the stands like we see every weekend. Bandy kicker misses it left, and then next thing you know, you got Cobras. So it's going to come down to the kickers, but give me Georgia in a close one. Be sure to subscribe down below. Thanks for helping us grow our audience week after week. We've reached over 200 subs. Be sure to comment down below who you think will win in this big SEC showdown prime time at 7:30. We'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle. Hey, YouTube, did you like what you saw? Be sure to subscribe down below and check out these videos coming up for this week.